All right, it's February. We're here talking about the Canmore real estate market for January. Obviously, we're fully settled into the new year here. It's always a little quieter, a little slower this time of year, is to be expected. But we're going to talk to you about what had happened in January for Canmore, the surrounding areas, and then we'll get into some details as per usual on the statistics of the real estate market here. So, do you want to start off with talking about Canmore and kind of what we saw as a whole?
Absolutely. So in Canmore, 24 sales in January, 1,348 and change million. Average square foot price was $815 a square foot and 55 days on the market.
Dead Man's Flats, we saw two sales. Both of these sales were short-term rentals. The average sale price was $817,000. The average square foot price we saw was $857, and it took 44 days on average to move those two properties. Nothing in Harvey Heights or Lac des Arcs for January.
In Exshaw, we had two sales, $685,250, $372 a square foot, and 61 days on the market.
Banff, we saw two sales. The average sale price was $1.245 million. Average square foot price was coming in at $1,800 a foot, and it took an average of 59 days to sell. We did talk about that $1,798 a square foot, and where that came from. There was a house on Muskrat Street that was just inputted incorrectly into our system the way it calculates the average square foot price. So it ended up recording as if it was only 700 square feet when the house itself was
14 or something.
Yeah, above
Yeah.
ground. So
And that number would still be pretty high.
Yep.
1.9 million for a 1,400 square foot home. So you're still creeping up into the high square footage price. But that property did have a reno and stuff. A lot of those properties on that street and in Canmore end up in redevelopment. So it'll be interesting
Yep.
to see what happens there.
Yeah, well, and I think it's worth noting that we've kind of gotten to a point now where the residential sector, for the most part, is past the Banff sector for average price per square foot.
Yeah.
Although they are very close, Canmore seems to be, on average, a little bit higher every month on their average square foot price, as opposed to Banff. Now, keep in mind, obviously, we do have those short-term rentals, but Canmore is definitely climbing the ladder there. So let's forget that and let's talk about some specific property types for the Canmore real estate market specifically. I'll lead off here, talk about some single family homes. So as of February 1st, we have 22 active single family homes on the market. In January, there were 5 recorded sales for an average sale price of $2 million, just over that. The average square foot price was $719 a foot, and those single families took an average of 34 days to sell.
Days on the market's nice there, at 34 days.
It is nice.
Now, we talk about this lots, that's the sold data. That doesn't take into consideration the active stuff that's still on the market, but
Yeah.
those particular properties took 34 days to sell, which in turn, reiterates pricing for
Yes.
sure. Townhomes, the inventory at the end of the month is 30. There were 5 sales, the same as the single family. Just about $1.2 million was the average sale price. $686 a square foot, and again, right around the 32 days on the market.
Apartments, we saw 46 active apartments for sale on the Canmore market as of February 1. There were 3 sales recorded for apartments in January. The average sale price of those apartments was $585,000, just under that. A couple of those properties, 2 of those properties, I believe, were in the employee housing district in Canmore. The average square foot price, $864. So that kind of reflects that. Those properties are usually a little bit smaller in square footage. And the average days on the market for those apartments were 89. One of those was a new construction property, bringing that average up a little bit.
Yeah.
But that was the apartment sector broken down.
Half duplexes, there's 10 active as of February 1. 2 sales in the month of January, almost 7 million, 2.66 million. $904 a square foot was the average square foot price, and 8 days on the market. So half duplexes are moving pretty good.
Excuse me. Yeah. Short-term rentals. hotel condos, we have 15 active sales. There were 5. Expect these numbers to creep up here as we roll into the springtime.
Mm-hmm.
Average sale price, 516,000. 2 of those were properties that were fractional ownership. Average square foot price, $670 a foot. And then, sorry, the average days on the market was 115. So again, just a note on that, 2 fractionals, and both of those fractionals sat at over 200 days each, which isn't necessarily uncommon per se for those properties to
No,
sit longer
for
because
sure.
they do require the buyer to be full cash. And they're a little bit of a unique opportunity as opposed to kind of that freehold style.
Yeah.
But overall, we are seeing a little bit of movement in the short-term rental sector, and obviously that's going to continue to grow. Do you want to touch on the tourist homes?
So the other short-term rental market is our tourist home. There's 6 active on the market as of February 1st. 3 sales in the month of January, 1.585 million and change there. $1,322 a square foot. Now, you and I were talking a little bit about, Spring Creek's
Yeah,
sales there and how
yeah,
those have creeped up into the $1,500 a square foot. There may be a difference opinion between you and I on where that's going, but that could be for a conversation and a video at another time. 24 days average on the market. Those are moving quite good. I mean, there was that one in Spring Creek that I think was $1,500 a foot, and both you and I went to Realtor Rounds the other day and said, "Man, that wow, it's pretty crazy." So
yeah,
they seem to be moving really good.
yeah. So there was one in there. I just pulled it up. It sold for 2.6. That
Mm,
includes the GST, obviously. 3-bedroom property, but that sold at 1527 a foot. So that's the highest tourist home that we've seen sell
yeah.
in Spring Creek as far as price per foot goes. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about that briefly here if you want. Uh, I was surprised to see that a little bit.
Hmm.
Obviously, I know the demand is there, and obviously 3 bedrooms in Spring Creek. You see maybe 1 or 2 of those a year that come up. The rest are kind of done under the table as far as pocket listings. Everyone's got a Rolodex of people who are looking for Spring Creek properties, and rightfully so. So,
Yeah.
um,
I do think
yeah,
the gross revenue on that, if I'm correct, was around 170
yep.
on that property. Wasn't 170,000?
Uh, yes,
I,
I believe so.
I
Yeah.
believe that's what the realtor was telling us.
No,
Now, I
no,
mean,
sorry. That one's different. Yep.
oh, that's a different property.
That's a
Okay.
different property. Yep. So,
Okay. Now,
anyways,
is that the true 3 bedroom, or is that the one that's the
this is
two
a
and a den?
this is a true 3,
Okay, that was the
and it's
true three.
1,700 feet, so it's good
That's
size.
that's a big size.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyways, I mean, I think that we're seeing the short term rentals in Spring Creek kind of hover around that 13 to 1,400 square feet. So when
Yeah.
I saw this one, that kind of surprised me a little bit. But that being said, again, I'm surprised, but also I shouldn't be because just
Yeah.
of the logistics behind that one. They are obviously pulling in some good revenue, but it'll be interesting to see how that affects the resale of the Spring Creek properties moving forward.
Yeah. 100% on that.
Yeah. So we can move on from the short term rental sector here. And let's just talk about some. Obviously, these year to date statistics are a little bit um, skewed because we're looking at 1 month of data, but we can compare it to 2025 year to date, so 2025 January. So, sold listings year to date in 2025, we had 25. That's a lot to take in right there. 2025, 25. 2026, we had 24. The 5-year average sitting at around 31. So, I mean, technically that's a 4% drop, but, you know, pretty much bang on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
End of month active inventory. Uh, 2021, or sorry, 121 in 2025. There's a lot of twos going on.
Mhm.
And in 2026, 132. So we have a little bit more inventory
Yep.
and up 9%. So,
Yeah.
and the average sale price, Parker, why don't you talk about that? Because people will kind of wonder what that looks like and why the
Yeah. So
difference.
the average sale price in 2025 was 1.722 million. And in 2026, we're at 1.348.
Yeah.
Um, so that seems, obviously that's a 22% drop when we're just looking at those two numbers specifically. That is specifically what had sold in January of
Yeah.
2025. That's not a really good indication of the way that the market is today. Our 5-year average is 1.214 for January. So we're over that. And I do want to briefly touch on kind of some more data to support what we're talking about here. If I could find it, just give me a moment. If you have something to add, feel free.
Well, I think the 5-year average is a really good indicator,
Mhm.
because it gives you a way broader perspective. We've grown, from 1.214 to 1.348. So, that shows us a positive growth. And in talking in a lot of our, monthly videos last year, we did discuss some downturns. So it's nice to see that, overall 2026 is up on the 5-year average. So I think
Totally.
that's a really, really good indicator for our market here.
Yeah. So I know we were talking a little bit about comparing how the market was kind of slowly from kind of that August of 2025 on, every single month seemed to be dropping a little bit in the average sale price.
Mhm.
Now, that percentage was still a growth from the year previously, but the average sale price dropped year to date. Um, so year to date, when we were looking at November data, we were at 1.259, and that number was continuing to go down. We saw it go down to in December, and I'll
Yeah.
find that here of what that was as well. Give me 2 seconds
But
here.
it had dropped from the 1.2, and now we're up at
Yeah, so
1.348. So
the average sale price in December was 1.228, and that sat at about a 6.5% growth from year to date. And so we're already seeing that number go up. So overall, I think it's a pretty successful January when we look at the sales kind of reflecting the average for the 5 years and 2025's data, but also seeing that average sale price grow. Now, obviously, we need to take that in with a grain of salt because we are looking at such a small sample size,
yeah,
which we typically do for January. But again, positive, I think, and that 22% drop from 2025 is a completely irrelevant statistic to talk about further.
yeah, and I think, like you said, from August through to the end of the year, we were looking at a drop, and now we've gone the
Mhm.
other way. And
Yep.
we've been talking about, we have felt like we were leveling out.
Mhm.
And I think that we maybe, and again, we'll see in the coming months, but I think we may have, leveled out and started to have some confidence in the market here. Not that we lost confidence in the Canmore market. I never saw that,
Yeah.
but
It was a
the
hands in
no,
your pockets type of situation a little bit.
yeah, and like, I mean, even the hot sheets of what's going on. So hot sheets, for those of you that don't know, are, as a realtor, we get to see what happens on a daily basis in Canmore. There's been, some sales that have happened really quickly.
Mhm.
Big houses to, some short-term stuff to some apartments that have come on, and I've sent them to a few clients and they're like, "Oh yeah, that looks really good." And a couple months ago I was like, "Hey, you're in a spot where you probably don't have to be too, you can take your time." And in two cases in the last 3 days, it's been like, wow, we missed out on those, was my client's verbiage. And so,
Yeah.
not that they're panicking about that, but I think it's something to watch in the coming weeks and months to see,
Yeah.
because we're only going to get busier coming into, March
Yeah.
and April here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It happens every year.
it
Well, it
does.
was interesting because I did run into another realtor and we were talking about the market a little bit, and he had mentioned that there was a property that he had a client in on, and he said, and I haven't fact checked this obviously, but he said that there were upwards of like 6 or 7 offers and
Wow.
potentially 10. Now that property was obviously super desirable and fairly priced. So,
Pretty neat,
but
unique. Yeah,
we haven't seen that very much lately. And then he also
no,
mentioned about another transaction that was a multiple offer transaction as well. So it's starting to happen, which it typically does January. I didn't know what was going to happen this year with what we
yeah.
saw trending, but it's weird. It's like middle of January hits, and then people are like, "Okay, let's go!" Right? Like I'm ready to go. So,
And the weather's
um,
been like, ridiculously.
yeah,
I don't want to say ridiculously warm. We've had a good ski season, and I don't claim to know what the hills are doing right now,
yeah,
but there's been some record snowfalls up there, and
yeah,
it's quite nice. You're seeing a lot of people walking around and a lot of vibe, and so
yeah,
that's that has something to do with it too.
yeah. And I wanted to touch on a little bit about the 5-year average stuff, because that is something that we can compare when we're looking at data for January, and instead of kind of comparing it to last year, just because January is such a small sample size.
Yeah,
So when we look at January for new listings, we're up 20% from last year. And the 5-year average is 45. So we're increased over that 5-year average. You're not going to see this on the sheet I sent you. This is just on my own thing that I pulled
yeah,
up
yeah,
here. So we've exceeded that in new listings. So we are getting more inventory. Our active inventory for the end of January, our 5-year average is 96. We're at 131.
yeah,
So we do have more inventory, which is fantastic. Now, keep in mind, five-year average, we're looking at 22 and 23 data, which we saw some crazy stuff happen.
yeah,
Um, so we're starting to get it back to normal when we see that. Now, our 5-year average for month supply was 2.15, and we're sitting at 3.2. Again, we're still taking into consideration those pandemic times, but before that, we were starting to see these levels. So this is good. We're getting back to that kind of stable market.
hmm,
Average days on the market. So this is very interesting to me. The 5-year January average was 70, and
wow,
we saw the 55 marker this month.
yeah,
So that's pretty good. Last January we were 106, which is
106 days in
yeah.
the
When I
market.
saw that, I was kind of like, wow, that's interesting. Again, small sample size. We talked about the average sale price at closing, and the difference between that and last January. Um, this is crazy. So the 1.722 that sold last January was our average sale price.
Yeah,
This year we were obviously 1.321, and the 5-year average was 1.2. But if you look at what had happened in January of these other months, 2022, the average was 904. 2023, the average was 1.1. Excuse me,
wow,
2024, the average was 987. Again, that's just from what had sold. We
yeah,
got to take that into consideration. But 2022 and 2024, they were hovering in the low millions. So like we've seen a substantial growth, like 33% since 2024 for January. Now
yeah,
that's just January. We can't, take that and run with it, but that's very interesting to me.
yeah.
Um, Sold to ask ratio as well. This is probably a little bit more of a reflection of kind of where we're sitting. 5-year average is 97.5%. We were just over 98%. So we've seen a growth every single year for the last 4 years
And
on that
on
one.
on the sold to ask ratio there,
Yep.
that 98%, because things are moving really quickly on those, there hasn't been price drops.
Mm-mm.
So that's a true 98%, right? Because it doesn't take into consideration price drops, in that factor. But when you have really low days on the market, things are moving relatively quickly. There's probably not price drops. So that's an indication that people are aware and pricing properties,
Yeah.
properly,
Yeah.
and getting what they're asking for or close to within a couple percent. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing for the market, because we were chasing prices there for a couple of years
Hmm.
where we're seeing astronomical growth, and it was like, well, that one sold for this, so just put this on it. So
Yep.
you got to be aware. Again, pricing is important. We're growing and growth is happening, but you really have to be aware and price properly.
Yep. Well, and I like to look at this because obviously this average sold to ask ratio at 98% and change does not take into consideration the price reductions, but
Yeah.
neither does the 2022, 23, 24, 25 number as well. So we're comparing apples to apples
Yeah. No,
here.
it is
So
apples to apples.
that number is continuing to grow, but like you said, it's we've gotten to the point now where people have rided out, you know, 2025,
Yeah.
and they've come to the realization of what the market has done, and they've reflected their properties accordingly, and they're still selling for more than what they paid for.
Yes.
Um,
100. The
like
equity in the market is not
we're not going
wavered.
the other way here at all.
No.
Um, and I think this is just like the start of what happens every single year, and
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see kind of where that goes as we move forward. But
There's a ton of inquiries going on every day. There's somebody reaching out,
yeah,
saying, "Hey, I'd like to know about this or that or the other." Whether it's residents or long term, short term. People are interested in moving and doing some things,
yeah,
and that's a really good indication from our standpoint. When things are in January or in February are starting to happen like that, it typically means that things are on the move.
yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
want to quickly touch on interest rates because I think I like to talk about it briefly.
Hmm.
By no means are we any sort of mortgage professionals or
No.
experts, as everyone knows. But from what I've read, there's lots of growing anticipation about potential interest rate relief later this year. However, nothing is guaranteed and timelines remain a little bit uncertain. So, what I found locally with that data is that we're starting to see buyers kind of get out of that little bit of uncertainty of what's happening with rates. Like there was so much talk about, yeah, rates are coming down, rates are coming down, rates are coming down. Now we're starting to see a little bit more certainty in the market. Yes, there's the uncertainty of what's going to happen later on in the year, but I just think that people are adjusting their expectations, and I think that they're running the numbers carefully, and they're starting to move forward at this rate. I mean, I think people are able to lock in some pretty decent rates in the market right now. Um, obviously not COVID rates, but when we're looking at interest rates as a whole, hovering around that high three, low 4% range, I think is pretty good. Um, when we're looking at, borrowing money.
Yeah, I think it's pretty excuse me, pretty it's pretty telling of where we're at, and I think, what's going to happen this year.
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of tie this off, obviously it's a familiar start to the year when we look at January. There's not a lot of data to look at, which is normal. But what I've found is obviously that average sale price for the month looks pretty good. Looks pretty realistic. I think we're not seeing anything spiked because of what had sold per se. Our average days on the market are competitive, and our average sold to ask ratio is up. So it tells me that it's starting to heat up.
Yeah.
Um, Majority of our sales for January also happened within the last 10 days, even 2 weeks of the month, which again, not uncommon, but I think it was 15 out of the 25 sales happened, I think, in the last 10 days of the month. So it's starting to pick up, and I think people who are in the residential sector, obviously the timing of the market is a little bit different, and I don't truly believe that there is a timing in the market for Canmore residential as much.
No, I
Um,
agree.
but for the short term rental, I think this is a huge opportunity for people who are looking. These properties are going to start to come to market. They already have, and like I said, this is a great opportunity and a great window for people to get educated, and the people who have been getting educated, you can kind of get into the action when that right property comes to market, because the demand is only going to increase, because come March, April, everyone wants to get these properties and have them locked and loaded for spring. So
Well, it's
it's also
like,
go
sorry,
ahead.
even the Blackstone property that just came on, we
Yeah,
haven't seen a Blackstone or a Stone Ridge on the market, rarely, maybe
yeah,
one or two a year for the last couple of years. So
yeah.
that's a tale that, people are
Yeah.
starting to move on stuff. Yeah.
And as sellers too, it's a good opportunity to list your property and move it quickly. Sometimes we see sellers try to ride out the summer, get that revenue, list in October, November,
Yeah.
and like we just saw in 2025, the demand just usually isn't as there as much. That doesn't mean it's going to sell for less than what it does in the spring, but it's a different type of process.
Yeah.
Um,
There's just more people,
yeah,
engaged and looking.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, I think that's a good snapshot of what we saw in January. We look forward to kind of seeing the February data as we get a little bit more information on the year to date statistics and whatnot to kind of compare. But I'm optimistic for the new year. I think that's what I expected to see, maybe a little bit better when it
Mm.
comes to the average days on the market and whatnot. So I think a healthy market compared to some of what I've been reading in other markets in Canada.
Oh,
So
I agree. I agree. I think we're
like
strong and
yeah, Calgary seems to be taking a little bit of a hit from what I've read, but
yeah,
yeah.
I heard that too. So
So, anyways, I think that's enough information for today. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll look forward to coming at you at what would it be, early February with another update. Take care.